A 12-year-old boy just walked into the holiest temple in Jerusalem and did something that left the most learned religious scholars completely speechless. These were men who'd spent their entire lives studying scripture, yet this child asked them questions they couldn't answer. They tried to silence him, but he wouldn't stop. And when his mother finally found him hours later, sitting among these grown men like he owned the place, she had no idea that this was just the beginning. His name was Isa, the son of Mary, and what Allah had planned for him would shake the foundations of an entire civilization. If you love powerful Islamic stories that inspire your heart and strengthen your faith, subscribe to Real Islam TV and share this video. And stay until the end, because the final lesson of this story will deeply move you. After the death of Prophet Zachariah, Mary found herself in mortal danger. When Isa was barely a month old, just 30 days into his life, Allah sent her a crystal-clear warning. Flee immediately. Her own people, the children of Israel, were plotting to murder both her and her innocent child. So she fled to Egypt. Mother and son found refuge on a hillside, and Egypt became their sanctuary for 12 long years. During this time, extraordinary events took place. Events that would eventually make the people fearful of what Allah had bestowed upon this child. When that fear grew too great, Allah sent another revelation to Mary. Leave, take your son to Damascus. She obeyed without hesitation, and they settled in the region of Nazareth, where Isa would remain hidden from his destiny until he turned 30. But even before his mission began, there were signs. When Isa was just 12 years old, something remarkable happened that gave us a glimpse of what was coming. He accompanied his mother on a journey to Jerusalem. While there, he wandered into the temple, the holiest place for the Jews, and found himself in the middle of a crowd of adults listening to lectures from the rabbis, the most elite religious scholars of their time. Now, understand something. This wasn't a casual gathering. These were grown men, learned men, discussing complex matters of faith and law. And here comes this 12-year-old boy who just sits down among them. No fear, no hesitation. He listened carefully to what they were saying. Then he started asking questions, not simple questions, not childish questions, questions that cut straight to the heart of matters these rabbis had never properly examined. The rabbis were disturbed. This boy's boldness was unsettling. His questions were exposing gaps in their understanding that they didn't even know existed. They tried to shut him down, to silence him, to make him go away. But Isa ignored every attempt. He kept speaking, he kept questioning, he kept expressing his views. And the more he spoke, the more obvious it became that this wasn't an ordinary child. He became so absorbed in the discussion that he completely lost track of time. Hours passed. Meanwhile, his mother had gone home, assuming he'd left with relatives or friends. When she arrived and realized he wasn't there, panic set in. She rushed back to the city, searching everywhere. Finally, she found him, still in the temple, still sitting among these learned men, conversing with them as if he'd been doing it his entire life. She was angry, worried, relieved all at once. He tried to explain. The discussion had been so engaging, so important, that he'd simply forgotten everything else. This was Isa at 12. Imagine what he would become at 30. Isa grew into manhood, watching his people drift further and further from the truth. The Sabbath, that beautiful day that Moses had dedicated to the worship of Allah, had been completely corrupted. The wisdom behind it, gone. The spiritual essence, evaporated. All that remained were rigid, suffocating rules that had nothing to do with worshipping the Creator. The Pharisees, who were supposed to be the guardians of religious law, had turned it into a prison. They made hundreds of things unlawful on Saturday. You couldn't light a fire. You couldn't extinguish one. Women couldn't even braid their hair. You couldn't defend yourself if attacked. You couldn't call a doctor, even if someone was dying right in front of you. But here's the twisted part. These same Pharisees, who enforced these rules so brutally, would bend them in a heartbeat when it served their personal interests. There was a rule against traveling more than 1,000 yards on the Sabbath. So what did they do? The day before, they'd carry food and drink 2,000 yards away, set up a temporary shelter and claim it as a home. Now, they could travel another 1,000 yards from that point. Technically legal, spiritually bankrupt. Isa saw through all of it. One Sabbath, as he walked to the temple, he saw a hungry child. He reached out and picked fruit to feed him. Violation. He saw elderly women shivering in the cold. He built them a fire for warmth. Another violation. When he finally reached the temple, what he witnessed there made his blood run cold. 20,000 priests were registered at that temple. 20,000, all of them making their living from it. The rooms were packed with them, but the actual worshippers, far fewer. The temple itself had been transformed into a commercial enterprise. Sheep and doves everywhere, being sold as sacrifices. Want to worship Allah? That'll cost you. Want to make an offering? Pay up. Every single step you took in that holy place cost money. They weren't worshipping Allah, they were worshipping wealth. The Pharisees and Sadducees, two groups who disagreed on almost everything, agreed on one thing: the temple was an excellent place to make money. They'd turned the house of Allah into a marketplace, and they were the merchants. And the poor, the people who couldn't afford to buy a sheep or even a dove, they were swept aside like garbage, unwanted, unworthy, invisible. Isa watched as priests burned countless expensive offerings inside the temple walls, while thousands of desperately hungry people stood outside, unable to even enter. This was the world he was born into. This was the corruption he would challenge. This was why his message would threaten every powerful person in his society. Then came the night that changed everything, a night of both tragedy and divine appointment. Two of the most righteous prophets Allah had sent, Yahya, John, and his father Zachariah, were murdered by the ruling authority. Their crime, speaking truth to power. Their punishment, death. On that same night, that exact same night, revelation descended upon Isa. Allah commanded him to begin his mission, to call the children of Israel back to their Creator, to expose the corruption, to reveal the truth. The life of ease was over. The page of struggle had been opened. Isa was 30 years old, and the most important work of his life was about to begin. But what he didn't know yet was just how much his people would hate him for it. And that's where we stop, part 1, because what happens next, it changes everything you think you know about this story. Prophet Isa walked into that corrupt temple system and did something so shocking, so confrontational, that the entire religious establishment knew they had to destroy him. But the miracles he performed, they were unlike anything the world had ever seen. The dead walking out of their graves, the blind seeing for the first time since birth, a table of food descending from heaven itself. And then came the betrayal. 30 pieces of silver, a kiss in the garden, and what they thought was a crucifixion. But here's the twist that most people don't know. It never actually happened. Not the way they tell it. The Quran reveals something completely different, something that will blow your mind. And we're covering all of it in part 2. But here's my question for you. If everything you were taught about Jesus was based on a story that got twisted over 2,000 years, would you want to know the truth? Drop a comment below. Have you ever heard the Islamic version of Prophet Isa's story before? And hit that subscribe button, and trust me, you do not want to miss what really happened that night in Jerusalem. The truth has been hidden for 2,000 years. It's time to uncover it.